we have at least 8 refugees in our midst. But in a way, we're all taking refuge. This is one of the things, this is like the only thing that we didn't attempt to do on Zoom. Because it just sort of felt like, you gotta be there. There's that ritual element of feeling the blessings and the vows washing over us, and the kind of visceral experience of being witnessed in this journey that these 8 people have undertaken the last long while to take on the vows as co-ops. And I was talking to someone yesterday, one of our refugees, and he said, it's getting serious now. And I said, yeah, it does that. Like, you think I'm going along and this will be this, it's kind of like it's a nice thing to do and it's coming out of me, and it's been quite a journey to contend with these 16 vows. And then it's almost like, I don't know, getting married or having a kid, or like these big events, that these ritual events, somehow you get this feeling of like, oh, I'm contending with the great initiatory forces somehow. And it's getting serious. And refuge itself comes from the 3 jewels, which is taking refuge in awakening, taking refuge in the way or the teachings, and taking refuge in the community. That would be us. And it's interesting because I was looking at the word refuge in our own language, and the re part, the return to the original. I thought, yes, that's what we're up to. We're doing this, we're coming to that moment before the original silence, the place before right and wrong, the place before we know what anything is. But the fuge part comes from fugitive and fleeing. And in one way, refuge is taken in our language and culture as this taking shelter, finding safety, and it's sort of implied away from things. And I thought, what we're doing really is we're stopping the fleeing in the way we're doing it. We're looking at the vows as ways that, or the precepts as ways that we tend to flee reality. And we're returning to it. I think we find out pretty quickly that you can't take refuge in your ideas about anything. Very quickly that one goes away. And mostly because life is so much deeper and stranger and inconceivable than our ideas can ever kind of get hold of. And somehow the precepts become ways of noticing that, how our ideas get in the way of being here, and the kind of resourcefulness that comes from being here. And I was thinking about the first time I encountered any notion of vows was in my early 20s, and my first kind of exposure to Zen through this woman named Pam Weiss. And she did a retreat on the 4 boundless vows, like what we sing at night. And in a similar fashion, you had to write your own vows, and there was something that touched me very deeply about this. I could tell I was just drawn to it. But I had this incredibly earnest, naive way of thinking that if I could just get these vows right, I would somehow figure out how to save myself and everyone else from suffering. And I worked really hard on it. And it was almost like I think the idea in my mind was if I could be kind enough and present enough and generous enough all the time, that I could get a handle on this suffering thing. Of course it didn't go that way. And I think there was also this idea that somehow if I could do that, I would always know what to do. And I could always help. And that was incredibly appealing. Didn't last very long, but was incredibly appealing. And one of the issues with that, and I think one of the things I love so much about the vows as koans, is that way I was holding it is so full of knowing, that I actually will know what's kind and what's generous and for whom and when and in what way, and that I'll actually make myself a little crazy trying to keep up with that. And it was a very interesting distinction she has used, which I'm sure you may have come across, but it came back to me, which is the difference between pain and suffering. And she used to always say, pain comes as part of the deal, but suffering is what we layer on extra. And I was talking to someone who's undertaking the vows at the moment, and she's on the pure vows, which are, I vow to do no harm, I vow to do good, I vow to do good for others. And she was saying to me that 30-something years ago, she really hates her sister-in-law, her brother's wife. And when they got married, she vowed, and she said, and I vowed, I will accept this woman. And so for 30-something years, she's been trying really hard. And the cycle goes something like this. She tries, she'll do something outlandishly, helpful or good for her sister-in-law. And it goes poorly, and then she thinks, that bitch. Doesn't she see that I'm doing good? I'm trying. And this happened again recently, where the sister-in-law texted her for something, and she went way out of her way to get the information. And then she asked for something in return, and the sister-in-law said, well, why don't you just go look it up? And she said, and I wanted to text her, and I won't tell you what it was. And she said, because I'm doing good, I'm trying to accept her. And then it kind of dawned on her, do no harm. What does that mean here? And she realized, A, she had no idea what was going on for her sister-in-law. B, the harm was inflicted by her, by being at war with this idea that it should be different, that her sister-in-law should be a different person, that she should like her sister-in-law more. And there was so much harm, not only to the sister-in-law, but to her own heart by holding on to these as true. So this injection, really, of uncertainty comes with treating the vows as koans, which is what we do. And it forces you then to ask, good for whom? What does good mean? Is good ever absent? And I think it also forces a kind of humility into the situation that most of the time I don't know. I have to be there, I have to find out. And even then, I don't know for sure. Disturbing, but kind of a relief also. there's the literal way of taking the vows, but you see if you start to engage them this way, things like not killing and not lying and not indulging in intoxicants, that it's like, anytime I'm trying to do away with some part of reality, I'm killing. Anytime I'm trying to manipulate, I'm lying. Anytime I'm chasing some kind of state, I'm looking for an intoxication of some kind. And this goes on and on and on and on, like front foot and back foot walking. This just goes on and on. Again, that absolute impossibility is kind of nice. Like all the bodhisattva vows are impossible. That's part of their magic. Absolutely impossible. But there becomes this kind of invitation where it's like what's being asked is we take refuge in reality. That's the awakening and the way and the companions. That I somehow have to be here. Last night, Jan Black, I'm looking at her, made a great comment, which was, she said, the more I practice, the more I just notice that when I'm saying something and it doesn't feel true, and I think that's true of all the vows, the more I'm here,